Good evening, everyone. This is the webinar, the informational webinar on the ARISS Educational Contact US proposals. And so tonight I'm going to give you an overview of how to fill out our proposal application and some of the things we are looking for. My name is Tanya Anderson. I am the Director of Education for ARISS USA. My call sign is KD9BQZ. So one more time, this is a competitive proposal process and it is for US schools and organizations only. So if you are outside the US, there is the web address that you can go to learn how your region of the world accepts applications for an ARISS contact. So ARISS is a worldwide organization, but every region of the world has their own application proposal windows and the way they accept proposals and what their proposal looks like. So there are two key components of an ARISS contact. The first component is the 10-minute radio contact, which is an experience for a full school, a full district, or a full community event. And then the other part of this is a large-scale aerospace and amateur radio education lessons and activities that take place in multiple grade levels, multiple classes, many times throughout the year for at least 4 to 6 months leading up to your contact. So obviously, if you're not a school, if you're a library or a science center, that's going to look a little different, but there still needs to be educational lead up to the contact. So that might be hosting summer camps, that could be hosting different workshops or having different exhibits at your science center or at your library for your guests to participate in. So the ARISS proposal process is a competitive proposal process that opens 4 times a year, so basically once each quarter. Selections to move to an actual contact are made based on educational impact and outcomes. The proposals are scored by the ARISS education team, and these team members most of them are currently in a classroom right now teaching, and they have previously conducted their own ARISS contact at their school. So they have lots of experience. So before you even sit down to fill out the proposal, of course, we want you to look at the questions and kind of understand what you're getting into. But before you start filling it out, we want you to talk with all of the stakeholders in your organization and create your team. So this is your school administration or your organization administration. Multiple teachers, faculty members, employees, not just, if you're in a school, does not just apply to your STEM teachers. You can do activities for an ARISS contact in gym class, in ELA class, in history class. So we really want to involve everyone in your organization. And then, of course, you need to have support from your local amateur radio club. So some things to consider before writing your proposal, some things that work and some things that will not work, is remember this is a semester-long or a year-long education plan that we're asking you to talk about in your proposal. Planning for just 10 minutes in a gym or an auditorium that's kind of the pinnacle of what we're working to. It's not everything that we're going to be focusing on. Again, we want to engage your whole school, your whole district, your whole organization. We do not do ARISS contacts for just a small class or an after-school club. Now, when I say not an after-school club, if you have 100 students in your after-school club or 200 students in your after-school club, then that would be different. You really do need to have flexibility and the day and time for your contact, and we're going to talk about why that's the case here in a little bit. Having only one specific day and time for a contact is not really going to work. And again, we'll talk more about that in a little bit. One of the things we ask you to fill out in the proposal is, what happens if the contact date and time change or something happens. So we want you to have realistic expectations. Just putting in there, we can change the bus schedule at the last second or with 10 minutes notice, that probably isn't a realistic expectation. We are looking for evidence of a team approach. So having one person try to handle all the parts that go along with an ARISS contact by themselves is not going to work. Again, you need to have top level support. So your administration, your head of your organization, they need to be involved and understand the commitment of an ARISS contact. We cannot just have a parent as the sponsor or the coordinator. This really has to come from the faculty or the staff at your organization. And then, of course, you need a strong partnership with your local amateur radio group. Right. The first section in our proposal is getting to know you. So here you're going to provide information on your organization, where you're located. You're going to tell us who's in charge of your organization, who our main ARISS point of contact would be, who the main educators are going to be, other organizations you are going to be working with. So this is where you are demonstrating to us that this is a team effort. So obviously, the same person's name and contact information should not be filled in for every single box here. Section 2 talks about scheduling considerations. So we need to know what your schedule is like. Are you wanting to do something during the school year because you are a school? Or are you looking to do something during the summer because you're a science center or a library and you'd like to incorporate this into one of your summer camps? We do need to know if there are specific days and times that will work. So obviously, the more flexible you are, the better. If you're a school, we understand you're not available on the weekends. We understand that your school day probably ends at 3 o'clock, 3:30, somewhere in there. And that's okay, but you need to tell us that in this area. If you know there are certain weeks during the school year where you have testing or you have breaks from school, or your library has a specific festival every year that we can't interrupt, make sure you put those in the scheduling considerations. And then you're going to choose if you know the method of contact, so either a direct contact or a Telebridge contact. And we're going to talk about those in a minute here. And this is something that your amateur radio club can help you with. And if you're not sure, it's okay to put not sure. That is perfectly okay. So a direct ARISS contact, what happens is your amateur radio club actually sets up the radio equipment on site. So at your school, at your library, it means they're putting the big antenna probably up on the roof. And you're going to have a primary radio station and a backup station. And so this is going to require, big cables to be fed through, and lots of practice and lots of coordination with your amateur radio club, because there's very specific equipment that they'll need for this. During a direct contact, you talk to the space station when your location is in the footprint of the ISS. So if you look at that picture, you see that white circle, and that white circle, and it's kind of big in this picture, but that's the footprint. So you have to be within the footprint for the contact to happen. So this definitely limits your options of when you can do your ARISS contact. Obviously, this provides hands-on radio experience for your youth. and you are having that one-on-one dialogue with the crew member. Now, not every location, every organization can do a direct contact. Sometimes maybe your location isn't set up to put the radio equipment. Maybe you have lots of trees or mountains or buildings in your way. So we provide something, an alternative called a Telebridge contact. And what this is, instead of having the radio station set up at your site, you use one of our radio stations, one of the ARISS radio stations that's set up somewhere else in the world. And so you can see where our different ground stations are. And so the contact happens when that ground station is in the footprint of the ISS. And so this actually provides a lot more flexibility with your when your contact can happen, because the ISS will pass over, probably one of our ground stations more often than your specific location. And then what happens is the ground station makes the radio connection with the ISS, and then they patch that radio contact through to your organization by a telephone line or some kind of internet bridge like Zoom or Teams or something like that. So this still provides that hands-on radio experience for your youth, and they still have the one-on-one dialogue. The only difference is the radio equipment is not set up at your location. And sometimes there's an advantage to this, because your local amateur radio club, instead of worrying about trying to get all the equipment and get it set up and test it, they can spend more time with the youth organizing and doing lessons with them and teaching them how to still use amateur radio and things like that. All right, section 3 of our proposal is the education plan. So the beginning of the education plan, we ask about the demographics. So who is physically going to be there during the contact? What is the population that's going to be engaged in your lead-up activities? Then we ask why you want to host an ARISS contact. What is this going to do for your youth? What is this going to do for your organization? The next part is your detailed plans to incorporate amateur radio content, as well as NASA and other educational resources within your organization. And so this is that 4 to 6 month education plan. What are you going to do with your youth leading up to the contact so they really understand and appreciate what's happening? Remember, this is a once in a lifetime experience for them, and we want to make sure they're getting the most out of it. Another part of this section is how will you pick the students who are going to ask your questions? Usually there's between 10 and 12 students who get to ask the questions, and our organizations usually prepare between 20 and 24 questions that they actually get to ask the astronauts. I will tell you that the education plan carries the most weight in the scoring process. So we are really looking for strong educational lead-ups to your contact. We are also asking about internal logistics. So where is this contact going to actually take place? So are you going to gather everyone in the gym or an auditorium or, something? Where is this going to happen? Is there a sound system that we can patch into, or your team can patch into? How are you going to get everyone to the location where the contact is taking place? All those types of things. We ask you to think about the fact that this is a live experiment. It's a live experiment that involves spaceflight. And that means lots of things can happen. The crew can suddenly become unavailable. There can be an unplanned EVA. There can be crew schedule changes. So there's lots of things that can happen that will change your contact day and time. You actually usually don't know your specific day and time of your contact until about a week out. You may know the month that it's going to occur or hopefully occur a little farther out, and then that'll get narrowed down to the week, hopefully, and then narrowed down to the day and time. We ask you to think about how you will evaluate the educational and STEM impact of the ARISS contact. We don't want this to be a one and done thing. We want to hopefully have your ARISS contact is the launching point for other STEM and space related activities within your organization. We do ask for a sample timeline. And so the sample timeline is, what would the day of your contact look like? Now, we understand if you've never done one of these before, if you've never been involved in one, you don't know what you don't know. But what we're really looking for here is, do you understand how to host a large scale event? Do you understand all the details that are going to go into moving a group of, anywhere between 100 and 500 people into a room and making sure everyone can be seated and bringing the kids up that are going to be asking the questions and things like that? We do ask about how you are going to work with the media. So you do need to have a media coordinator on your team. How will you let others know about your contact? Contact local newspapers, local television stations, social media, things like that. And then letters of commitment. So letters of commitment from the amateur radio club you're working with, from if you have a letter of commitment from your administration or the head of your organization, if they're not the ones filling out this proposal. Some organizations bring in other outside organizations to be part of their education plan or their ARISS contact day. So whatever you have planned, get a letter of commitment from them to add to your proposal. All right, so there are some common mistakes we see when reviewing proposals. So we want to kind of give you a heads up for those. So again, we want you to reach a large audience. An ARISS contact, it's free to your organization, but it costs about $43,000 in-kind support from NASA as far as time for the crew and all the things that have to happen to make the ARISS contact a success. So we want to make sure we are reaching as many youth as possible with every contact. Make sure you are providing as many details as possible in your education plan. Make sure you have concise answers and follow the word limit in each section. Please don't include links or web URLs in your answer. I'm going to be 100% honest with you. Our review team is not going to open them. So we are reading what is actually on the page. If you put links or URLs, they're not going to be looked at. Make sure you are providing an answer to each question in the proposal. You'd be surprised how many proposals we get where people just skip questions. So we really do need an answer for every question that's being asked. And again, you need to be as flexible as possible with the days and times for your contact, but you need to be honest about your organization's availability. So a thing to keep in mind is the acceptance of your proposal is just the beginning. If your proposal is accepted, you are going to have several deliverables and there are going to be several deadlines you have to meet leading up to your contact. And if those deliverables don't get turned in, if deadlines are missed, you can lose your contact. So, there is an organizational agreement. It's kind of like a contract between us and the organization that's holding the contract. And so there's certain milestones along the way that have to be met to continue forward in the process. So we're going to answer questions here in a minute, but I just wanted to let you know our current proposal cycle opened on January 13th. It's going to close on February 28th. And this proposal cycle is for the contact window of July to December of 2025. The completed proposals are sent to education@ariss-usa.org, which all that information is on the website and it's also in the proposal. If you decide that this isn't the right time or it's going to take a little longer to get all this information together, like I said, we do have proposal cycles that open up once a quarter, so you can see that we are going to have another one that opens up in April and then another one that opens up in July of this year.